The Week 7 NFL DFS main slate is going to be a tricky one because not only are we deprived of a lot of really good offenses that are on bye for this week, but also there are a lot of slanted games where one side may score a bunch and the other side may not score a whole lot. So we have to decide where can we find production with the good teams like Dallas, etc. on bye, and how do we handle those teams facing opponents that may not do a whole lot and keep that game competitive for all 4 quarters? That is our task for today to get you set for week number 7. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sanas. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, joined here as always by Brandon Gadula. He is the managing editor of numberFire.com. Brandon, a tricky, I would say, week 7 coming up. How you doing today?
Yeah, real tricky. There's one game that I think we would look at and say, yeah, we'll stack this one up. Everything else, you say, you got to talk yourself into it. And yeah. I don't like that. You're going to be talking about some data on heavy favorites. I think that we have some interesting games that I don't really have a whole lot of. So for you and I to want to stack a game, we want to like both quarterbacks. So I look at the Falcons Dolphins game. It's a 47.5 point total with a 2.5 point spread, and I'm like, I'm not playing either quarterback, so I can't really say I like to stack that game, but it would otherwise fit our process of tight spread, relatively high total. So yeah, I mean, it could be a week where we just go with the onslaughts for the favorites, outside of the Kansas City and Tennessee game, but I think there's a whole lot to go over for this week.
Yeah, I think that it's an interesting dilemma because if you want to stack Kansas City, Tennessee, you're going to have to pay the piper because the salaries there are absurd. And if you do that, it makes it tougher to get to the teams that are heavily favored. So do you want to go with potential shootout, or do you want to go with Cooper Kupp, Mike Evans, et cetera, the guys who are on the teams that are heavily favored? And I think I know my answer to that. We'll talk through how to handle things in terms of the heavy favorites. We'll talk about some undersalaried running backs, and we'll talk about a lot of stuff to get you set for this main slate. First, a quick reminder that we do have a listener league for this week. Go to FanDuel.com/league/listener league, FanDuel.com/league/listener league to get yourself entered. It's a $5 entry, 3 entries max. There is no rake, so FanDuel makes nothing off this contest. That's the best kind of contest you can play. FanDuel.com/league/listener league to get yourself entered and play against other people listening to this podcast and the late round podcast as well. Also, football fans, FanDuel's giving you the chance to bet on week 7 of the NFL season. All you got to do is go to sportsbook.fanduel.com or download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Place a 3+ leg same game parlay wager on any week 7 NFL game. If your bet loses, get a refund and site credit. Max refund is $10. Bet on week 7 of the NFL season with FanDuel by heading over to the FanDuel Sportsbook today, placing a risk-free NFL same-game parlay. Must be 21 plus and present in Arizona, Colorado, Connecticut. What up, Connecticut? Making my read longer. Appreciate it. Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, or West Virginia. Refund issued as non-withdrawable site credit that expires in 7 days. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Same game parlay available for multiple sports in all states on mobile and web. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Visit fanduel.com/RG in Connecticut. Call 888-789-7777. I've not done that one before, so we're learning on the fly here. Visit ccpg.org/chat. In Indiana, 1-800-9 with it. For confidential help in Michigan, 1-800-270-7117. In Tennessee, call the red line at 1-800-889-9789. In West Virginia, 1-800-GAMBLER.net. Or in Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. Let's go through our slate overview for this week number 7 slate. And Brandon, I think to me, it kind of comes down to not just the Chiefs Titans generally, but Derrick Henry specifically, because he is 11,000. I think that the first thing you do when you are deciding, if you're doing single entry, the first question you ask yourself is, do you use Derrick Henry or do you find other ways to get exposure to that game? What's the overview for you on this slate?
Yeah, that's the real question, because I mean, you and I were under in our expectations when we named that salary for Aaron Jones on Monday, we were way under 8,500.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Jones is still maybe Darrell Henderson, but Jones is really the guy who has the potential to really make you regret not using him outside of Derrick Henry. So like, it's not like we have Henry at 11,000. We have a healthy Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook on the slate, Austin Eckler, or maybe Alvin Kamara in a good spot. Like, it's Henry, and then it's a cavern for the most part to everyone else. And that is making the question that much harder, because if Henry gets you 35, yes, that's 11,000 of your salary, but I don't really know if anyone else is going to get you 30. Even 25 looks a little bit thin for these guys. So, yes, you associate that with the salary involved, but again, at a certain point, you need those points. So it does come down to Derrick Henry. And I think the single game or the single entry conversation is more apt, because as someone who historically has faded Derrick Henry in good spots and just hope that he doesn't score twice, I'm not there at this point. The workload is just too good. The matchup's too good. The game's too good. So yeah, the single the single entry discussion, I think, is really like, or like 3 entry, something like that. It is really fascinating. So I'm leaning toward playing Henry in a single entry. Mm-hmm. What about you?
Especially because you can go with Henry. I have a lineup in front of me, which is Mahomes, Hill, Henry, and I don't hate it. Like, the other spots are not that bad, honestly. Like, yeah, it means you are parlaying together 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys with salaries below 6,000, but I also don't mind it given the way that those guys grade out. I would also say I've been looking at some other projection systems outside of numberFire to see what they think of Henry this week, and they think he's oversalaried. So
okay.
I don't think we're going to get a situation where he's like 40% rostered. I think that's a key, because like a lot of people do run optimizers, and I don't think he'll grade out well in those this week, which is another key factor in me saying I'm pretty willing to just bite the chalk, and just load him in.
Well, he is, I think, if I'm going to nitpick, he's oversalaried because the odds that he really overperforms that number are small, but the odds that he has a great game are high.
Yeah.
And you made a good point before the show where points could be at a premium this week.
I think so.
So it's really, I think the driving question for me is, okay, does Derrick Henry erupt? If not, is he still good with like 20 points? And does someone like Darrell Henderson have like the 25-point game?
Right.
Chuba Hubbard, Joe Mixon, any of the Lenny, like
I think you listed the most likely guy to burn us. Well, not burn us, because I'll use a lot of him, but
but it's like if 3 of those guys were even below get to 20, then the salary is really going to work against Henry if he's just putting up 25. So the case for Henry couldn't be a whole lot better right now. Great game, amazing workload, especially relative to the other guys. Great rushing matchup. So we're leaning toward playing him.
Yeah.
But being realistic, I will probably be just a bit overweight on the field. Do you have an expectation of his
30?
Roster rate? 30. So I'd probably get to about 40. Because I was thinking,
I think 40 to 50 is my range.
It's definitely not a lock button. It's too hard. And again, the odds that he overperforms so greatly that you have to have him and that no other running backs, like a combination of them. It's kind of the thing is like, there's still a combination of backs who can, if you play them all, can get you those points. And I want a lot of Tyreek because got some good numbers on him this week.
The good thing is, if you don't want to get to Henry, like if you in the lineups where you're not using him, AJ Brown is very much there, very much in play, very easy to get to. So you're not avoiding that game. You can just use a different way to get there and save a lot of salary. But I do think that being overweight on Henry relative to the field is a way to play things for this week. We'll talk about that game more in just a second. First, we'll go through some injuries. Starting off with that game, all 3 of Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown, and Julio Jones missed practice Wednesday. Hill and Brown probably going to play. They played through their current ailments last week. Julio, I would guess, is going to sit. I think he's on the wrong side of questionable, at least. We'll talk about that game in the bookmaker section. Washington was super shorthanded at practice on Wednesday. Antonio Gibson, J.D. McKissic, Curtis Samuel, and Ricky Seals-Jones all missed practice. Gibson and Samuel are legitimately questionable. I would guess that McKissic and Seals-Jones are good to go. We'll talk about them in the bookmaker section as well. Antonio Brown missed practice Wednesday with an ankle injury. He apparently suffered that in week 6 at some point, which is on Thursday. So it's been a bit more concerning to me that he missed practice Wednesday than usual. Rob Gronkowski also is still not back at practice because of his rib injury. So let's talk about this quickly. If Brown does sit, would that draw you in on either Mike Evans or Chris Godwin against the Bears?
I like Godwin at his salary, I think, regardless or even irregardless of Antonio Brown's situation. He's kind of underperformed just with like touchdown expectations. I think the workload's fine. If you take Brown out, for sure, I'm into these guys. The question is if they're all healthy, I'm going to feel like a donkey not playing some of these guys because it's such an elite passing offense. But then I just feel like we are back to kind of square one where you're just guessing at who's going to have the breakout game. And I mean, odds are it's going to be Antonio Brown just because he's still very good. But if he's hurt, that kind of goes down. So, for me, I like Godwin the most. And if Antonio Brown takes a week off to get healthy, I'll have some Godwin at 6,700. That's really low for him.
It is. I want to try to find here. So the only game where they had without Antonio Brown was against the Rams. And I know Jalen Ramsey's played a lot of slot. So I'm trying to look up how often he was against. So 18 routes for Godwin came against Ramsey in that game.
Mm-hmm.
Only had 2 targets on those 18 routes. He did run some routes against other guys, but that was kind of the primary defender he faced. So in that game, he had 7 targets. Gronk had 7. Mike Evans and Gio had 10. So a lot has changed since that Rams game, which is weird because it wasn't that long ago. But I think that I'd agree with your assessment where the Bucs, if they're going to be spread out and they don't have to throw the entire game, may be tough to get to. But if you concentrate that target tree, then I think it's a lot easier to tolerate. I'm going to use Fournette regardless. I'll talk about him later on, but I do think that Godwin would grade out really well at 67 if we get no Brown here.
Yeah. And if quarterback were a little bit tougher, I think I would be able to get to Tom Brady. Probably won't get there as it is just because I love Mahomes. And if I'm taking a pass only quarterback, around 8,000. So, Stafford, Brady, Rodgers, it's going to be Stafford for me just because of a lot of things. Dome
Narrative.
Game, horrible defense,
Narrative.
And the revenge factor.
Narrative.
I feel like he's a lock for 4 passing touchdowns.
Yeah, not because of his revenge, but because of Sean McVay's revenge against Jared Goff. That's the reason. Because Stafford, I think, is on good terms with the Lions, but McVay, I still think he kind of hates Jared, and he's also an egomaniac. So those are factors that I am considering. I'm not going to bet anything based on this, but I'm just putting it out there. He's a psycho, and that might help things here. Other side of that game, Damian Williams is still on the COVID list for the Bears. They're facing the Bucs, which is not a situation where you want to use running backs, but would you have interest in Khalil Herbert at 6,000 if Williams were to sit again?
I mean, it's that matchup that's tricky, but he did run routes, so that helps me a little bit. It's just a matter of his and I have the ceiling projections and stuff, but I'm going to kind of rule it out here just because it's such a tough matchup. Now the yardage has been good for him for the past 2 games, but I just even on a slate where I'm looking for some running back value to help balance out a Derrick Henry lineup, I want to make sure that all these guys have the ability to make up for Derrick Henry being just okay. I don't know if Herbert against the Bucs really has that 25-point output in his arsenal, but maybe that's just me.
It's really all about ceiling. It's not about the floor will be fine in this scenario, but I don't know, my expectations are low for this offense, which means they're inherently going to be low for him. And I think that would be enough to push me off even if there's no Damian. Hopefully Damian comes back so I don't have to worry about it. But I think either way, not a huge chance he burns you. Dallas Goedert's still on the COVID list as well. Lane Johnson is back with the team. That's a good thing for the Eagles. You'll run through the Eagles outlook in the trend section. Herbert is 6,000. There may be a pivot on that team at $100 less, which we'll talk about later on. The Giants seem likely to be without Saquon Barkley, Kadarius Toney, and Kenny Golladay in week 7. All those guys missed practice Wednesday. Darius Slayton was back, though, so they get the Panthers here. What's your view of Devontae Booker, Sterling Shepard, and Slayton in this game, assuming that those injury assumptions are correct?
Yeah, so in the trend section, I almost did the Giants, but then I remembered you talked about the Giants, or I talked about the Giants last week. One of us did.
I talked about them. Oh, what do we expect if Mike Glennon plays? And then the Thursday craziness occurred.
So I started writing up some notes, then I remembered, and then I swapped over to the Panthers, which we also discussed last week. But so I had some notes, but I think really the main standout is Sterling Shepard because his target share was great. But I'll be going back to Booker. I would love some Darius Slayton. I don't actually even know what his salary is.
53, I think. I didn't look.
55.
Okay, that's a little high.
High?
Yeah, I mean he gets like the kind of targets we want, but like I don't think the target volume will be great, and I don't think that the target quality will be great. I like him in general. I think that that's my concern there.
Yeah, I mean it's a matter of whether we like this game, and so actually speaking about this game in the trend section, we put the bookmaker info, those games that are most interesting first. So we kind of remove those from the games that we're considering for trends. And by the time I got to the sheet, because it's a small main slate, the only games we weren't really covering at this point were the Panthers Giants, which I think has some appeal, like some low end appeal, and then the Jets and Patriots, which I was absolutely not talking about. So I kind of am probably going to be I'm going to have a little bit of a soft spot in my heart for this game because I think I was forced to look at it a little bit deeper. It's a tight spread, and I know the total's low, but like I kind of like this game. I'm going to talk more about Sam Darnold and his performance. I think maybe you seem low on Darnold. I'll see if maybe I can flip you around.
Be? It's like he's been doggy do.
I'll see if maybe I can flip you around on.
You
on
cannot.
That one.
You're not. I'm just gonna. You're not going to.
But it's so this game's like an outlier because every game on the main slate has a 47-point total or better aside from this game and the Patriots Jets game.
Yeah.
But this game also
like
has
above 47, basically. It's very weird. It's a very weird slate. Booker, yes or no?
Oh, yes.
Okay, cool. I'm down with that as well. Devonte Parker and Preston Williams both participated in the Dolphins walkthrough on Wednesday. Parker has missed the past 2 games. Williams has played twice so far this year. Will Fuller still in IR. We'll talk about that game more into the bookmaking section. Speaking of which, let's go there now. Let's start things off with that key shootout of the week with the Chiefs and the Titans. Total here is 57.5 with the Chiefs favored by now 4.5. That spread is tightening. We love that. This game checks every box. The one issue is the Titans likely without Taylor Lewan and Julio Jones. So are you into any of the Titans value options? So we like AJ Brown. We like Derrick Henry. Are you going to any of the lower salary guys? And do the injuries to Lewan and Julio impact your view of this game as a whole?
Yeah, the injuries make me a little bit lower, but I'm not gonna talk myself out of the game of the week just because of some injuries. As for the values, probably not going to chase that either. I don't have to, and so I don't really feel like I want to because really, it would just be their like secondary, tertiary receivers, and I don't know if there's enough juice there necessarily.
Yeah, I think like I've been looking long and hard this week at Nick Westbrook-Akine, and I'm trying to find this pronunciation here. Here we go.
That's how I always hear it on Red Zone and stuff.
Akina.
Okay. Oh,
Nick
yeah.
Westbrook-Akine. So I've been looking at him, but like the checklist at wide receiver, regardless of salaries, can you give me 85 yards or give me 2 touchdowns? I don't think the 85 yards is going to happen, and I feel skeptical that the 2 touchdowns will happen. he has gotten some deep volume, and he's going to be on the field. Like, they keep talking him up. It seems like he's a good blocker from what how they regard him. He has decent speed for his size, but like, he's also not fast. He's just big. So I have a hard time convincing myself that he can get me 85 yards. So I think that the Titans for me really just come down to Derrick Henry and AJ Brown. As far as the Chiefs go, very to Darrell Williams at 67. Prefer Fournette over him, but we'll use Darrell happily. I'd rank him probably below. I don't know. I'll figure out how I rank him relative to the 5,000/6,000 running backs there, but I'm very on board with him.
But okay, before we move on from Westbrook-Ikhine, right?
Ikhine.
Yeah. All right. Sorry, Nick. I know you're listening. I'm sorry to let you down. He has 2 games where he's played at least 75% of the snaps. In those games, 6 targets per game, 41 yards, 62 air yards, 1 downfield per game, but 2.5 red zone per game. So maybe he could get like a touchdown and 60 yards, which is like it the salary being that low, 5,200.
You're probably right.
I could probably talk myself
limited though.
Yeah.
Like, let's say you've got 10 Titans Chiefs stacks and you've got, 10 slots allocated to a Titan. I would say 6 Henry, 3 AJ Brown, maybe 1 Westbrook-Ikhine.
Probably 1 or 2. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe get a Tyreek and then a Kelsey
That's
or
fine.
something.
That's fine. I think that works.
Sorry, you were talking about Darrell?
Yeah, I think Darrell's fine. On board there. I think Mecole is also fine. So they're both very much secondary options. I also think Travis Kelce is more so fine than high priority for me. If we look at the games that they've played so far this year, target share for Kelce 23%, but just 11% deep and 17% in the red zone. He's got the stinger he's dealing. It seems like it's a stinger at least. He was weird. His arm was weird, and he's listed with a neck injury on the practice. I think it's a stinger. It's a weird situation there. So I feel like for me, I know Hill will be the most popular way to get here, but I have a really hard time deviating from that personally.
Yeah. I mean, Tyreek Hill, all 3 of his big games have come against teams that were outside the top 6, because he's faced 3 teams inside the top 6 in yards per target allowed on downfield passes. Mm-hmm. The other teams he's played have all been, I think, outside the top 18 or outside the top 20. All 3 of his big games have come against those teams that have had worse numbers on downfield attempts, and the Titans are 31st in that category. So it is really hard to get away from Tyreek. And I think the primary way that, and this won't really be groundbreaking, if I'm not playing Derrick Henry in a single entry, it's so that I can get to Tyreek Hill and then the sort of mid-range running backs. But so I want to make sure that I'm getting access to the high ceiling receivers, which I historically wouldn't consider as much as I am this week.
Well, I think with the lack of high-end running backs besides Henry, it's the opportunity cost is just lower, which helps a lot. So I think that's a positive for that one. Where are you at on Ryan Tannehill? We talked about him a lot on Monday as being a guy we were down to use. That was before the Monday night game when Julio got re-injured effectively. I know Julio has not been good this year so far, but it is still I would assume a downgrade from Julio Jones to Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. So that's my concern. I'm still going to use Tannehill, and he might be my number 2 quarterback this week behind Mahomes. But I think that does lower it where, if I'm going X% before, I'll lower it down to X -10 or X -5 or something like that.
So, I mean, it just depends on how willing you are to forgive, I think. He's got the 6 games, obviously. 2 of them have been against top 3 adjusted pass defenses based on numberFire's metrics. So he's got 4 games outside of the top 3. And all 4 of those were outside the top 20. Kansas City's 29th. So it's more comparable to look at those 4 games. But in only 2 of those 4 games did he have AJ Brown healthy. And in those 2 games, which I know we're reducing the sample a ton, but do you really want to look at games against top 3 defenses whenever the pass defense is really bad? Probably not. in those two games against comparable defenses and with AJ Brown, he's doubled up the league average in passing efficiency at numberFire. I'm not that concerned. If the salary was higher, I would be concerned, but
Sure.
he opens up a lot. And really, among all the passers in the 7,000 range, they all have some concerns. And I think Tannehill probably has the fewest concerns. It might be a little bit overlooked just because of the issues that he's had. Julio's banged up, Luan, that whole situation. So I'm totally cool with Ryan Tannehill this week, and I think it's probably overthinking it to go away from him.
Yeah, I think the only guy with a comparable ceiling in that range is Aaron Rodgers at $7,900. I think everyone else in that range definitely doesn't have the same ceiling as Tannehill, because like Tannehill is due for some positive touchdown regression. Like every touchdown they scored this year has been on the ground, which is fair. The other thing I would say is you can stack Tannehill with Derrick Henry, because what you're getting there is exposure to every single yard and every single touchdown the Titans score. If it's not Derrick Henry rushing, it'll be either Ryan Tannehill passing or Ryan Tannehill rushing.
Mm-hmm.
And in this scoring environment, I know they don't like, and like Henry will get some targets, but like we're not playing them for the double dip. But if you get access to every yard and every point a team accumulates in a game with a total of 57.5, I don't care if they don't like, I don't care if I don't double dip. Like that production, 500 yards is 500. And like, I'm not projecting 500 yards, but like that workload is fine to double up with. So I am very okay stacking Tannehill and Henry. We've seen a lot of times last year and the year before where they both gone off in the same game. So I have no issues with that personally. What about you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this alone won't get us onto Tannehill, but if you combine those salaries and then average them out, you'd be getting Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill at about 9,300. Oh, not about, but 9,300 each. And you'd say, yeah, if I can play Derrick Henry for 93, I'll maybe overpay to roster his quarterback in a fantastic game. So thinking about
if you lower Henry to 10K and put Tannehill at 8.6.
Yeah, that's more appropriate. I just did the averages here.
Right. I think that's pretty viable because of what it gives you elsewhere. Like if you go with Tanny, Henry, and Hill, like that's a pretty, you've got some flexibility. Like I had the Mahomes Henry Hill one, and I prefer that one obviously. But you have to make fewer consolations on the value plays. And I think that's a positive. So I think that even though it's high salaried, I think I just want to load up on this game. Any final thoughts for you before we move on to the next one?
I think we got the right core plays, and I think the value plays are in consideration for sure.
I would agree. Okay, other game here to discuss, a game that probably only DFS players could love, is Dolphins versus Falcons. Total is 47.5, or 47 now, actually. I think the spread is tight at 2.5 points. We like that for sure. Both these teams very willing to air it out. The Dolphins have been trying to talk about the running game this week, which is kind of concerning, but they also can't run, so I'm not that concerned. Both these teams have some lower salaried options, as we do need on this slate. So are you willing to stack up both sides of this one? If so, who stands out?
Yeah, so the total is 47 now. Okay. Stack up implies to me quarterbacks, and this is a no quarterback game.
Right.
So that caveat needs to be thrown in here.
So a no quarterback game stack.
Yeah, so mini stacks is where I am. But I like this game otherwise, like for a mini stack purpose. Calvin Ridley for sure. Jump into tight end. I think both tight ends are in play between Mike Gesicki and Kyle Pitts, right around 6,000. Tight end, we've got some big names, but Kelsey, might not be 100%. Mark Andrews up to 7,500 with that salary. Darren Waller at 68, but he's not really been Darren Waller with the work. Like,
I'm gonna use him.
I'm gonna get there too, but it's a week where there are multiple tight ends who can put up 15 to 18 to maybe 20.
Yeah.
So I don't want to punt at tight end too much. That's a lot easier to justify when it's like Mark Andrews and nobody else. And you say, if Andrews doesn't get there, then we're all kind of in the same boat. But both tight ends, Calvin Ridley for sure. I like Jaylen Waddle. Is that where we are with this pronunciation?
I was Googling today. I don't know.
We still don't know.
Back to Waddle. I'll go to Waddle until I hear more that it's
okay. Jaylen Waddle, great workload. And I have a note because he's one of my loves for this week. Don't care too much about the guys returning. He still had a with Tua in week 1, he was still pretty fine. You seem concerned.
Not concerned. I'm just excited about the guys who are returning.
Okay. Yeah, so who else here? No Miami running backs. You can talk to me about Cordero. Talk to me about Cordero because he's your guy.
I don't know. I think that like he's fine. I can use him. But like, am I actively seeking him out? No. Because like Tyreek Hill is 85, and I'd be using him at wide receiver to be clear. But I can pay $500 more to get to Tyreek Hill. I can save $500, go to Jamar Chase.
Cordero or Nuke? Well,
that's probably a bad question because I would say Cordero there, but it's not. I would
Cordero or DJ Moore.
I like this game more. I don't know. Don't put me in a bad spot here. I'm going to get clipped up on. Put on.
We'll stick to this game.
No, I mean, like, I think it's a fair question, but I think that, like, I would just rather go more Tyreek Hill. But Ridley is 73, and his usage was insane before that London game. So the first 4 games this year, Ridley, 27% of the overall targets, 59% of the deep targets. Matt Ryan wasn't going deep initially, but did start to go deep, a couple games in. 29% in the red zone. He leads the team in all 3 of those categories in the first 4 games. So, like, I feel like Ridley is an amazing play this week, and I want to run it back with Devonte Parker being the guy on the other side. Parker got in a limited session. I know there's like, Tua won't throw in tight windows, but like he did have 81 yards in week 1 against the Patriots. Parker did with Tua starting in that game. Parker in his first 4 games, 3 of those were without Tua, but 22% of the overall targets. Jaylen Waddle was at 21%. Gesicki was at 18%. Parker had 38% of the deep targets. Waddle at 10%. Gesicki at 29%. So Parker is $5,600. I think that a mini stack of Devonte Parker and Calvin Ridley will be one of my favorite mini stacks on this slate, just because both those salaries I think are too low for the rules they have.
So where are you with Jaylen Waddle then?
I like him and I'll use him, but I'd rather go Parker if I had one lineup.
Okay.
I'm not off him, and I'm not off Gesicki either, but I think that Parker is probably going to go overlooked. I'll take it. So I know, again, there's like the narrative of he doesn't align with Tua and the way that Tua plays, but like you can get separation even if you're Devonte Parker against this Falcons secondary. So I'll take it and be in on him here.
Also, I looked into this last year. I'm trying to pull it up, but it's just taking too long. Tua had like a really high tight window percentage on next gen stats.
Pretty sure it was higher than Ryan Fitzpatrick's, and I'm pretty sure his 8-out was higher too.
Yeah. So like, I mean, I get it, but like,
also Tua's 8-out is 8.1 this year. Jacoby Brissett's like 6.8. Like,
yeah,
narratives sometimes get a little bit out of hand.
Yeah. Also, I mean, I'm dismissive of a lot of narratives, and probably to a detriment to some degree, where I'm not accounting for what other people are saying. But yeah, the data on Tua is not really as reflective as like he won't throw the ball into like so I just at least wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, and like so Tua had some really bad plays last week, like they were hideous, and I was like losing my mind because it looked so bad. But he still had an efficient game, and now he's getting Parker and likely Williams back. So I think he can support pass catchers here. So I want to get to Parker, want to get to Ridley on the bring back. Any final thoughts for you on this game?
I think that's it. The big question for me was Patterson, and
I'll use the hard game stacks, but not outside of that.
Yeah, Patterson or Darrell Henderson, same salary.
Darrell,
okay, me too.
But it's not. It's more so compared to the wide receivers. So I think the new question was pertinent.
Okay.
But I'd go Henderson if we're looking at the running back, because there is opportunity cost. So yeah, that's a fair question to ask, Phil. Among the heavily favored teams that won with the most lively opponents seems to be the Packers. This spread is down to 7.5, open at 9.5. So there is some action on the Washington football team. Total is 49.5. I think it went up. 49 for this game. So the total has gone up. The spread is tightened, which means there's some action on Washington. What could go wrong? How are you viewing this game from a stacking perspective?
I mean, there are only so many ways for me, I think. With the Packers, it's Devonte. I still don't play Aaron Rodgers in DFS, so
I haven't this year, I don't think.
Like, I mean, maybe that's a mistake. I don't actually know what his mean, he's got
fine, but no outputs that would burn you for not using him.
He's got 1 300-yard game, one game with more than 2 passing touchdowns, no rushing. So I'm not going to get to Rodgers, which puts me on, going progressively to running back. I think Aaron Jones is oversalaried, but in game stacks, I'll get there. I just don't think I'd build around Aaron Jones as a priority, unless I think that, I'm not playing Henry in this lineup. I might as well play Aaron Jones so that I get access to one of those two guys. I just think Aaron Jones is kind of oversalaried by about 1,000. Yeah. So then it's Devonte. Is that it from Green Bay that we're considering?
I don't want any of the side pieces. That's a weird way to prise that. I shouldn't say it that way.
So I say tertiary.
Yeah, I guess it is Jones and Adams. So with Jones, I think that he's now in the same realm where I put Derrick Henry at times last year, where what are the odds he burns me? Happens to be that the odds that Jones burns me are lower than they were with Henry last year. I think it's 10 to 15%. So I'll probably have 10 to 15% Aaron Jones as a result of that. I can't get higher though, because you're right. He is oversalaried. Very much so. So I think it's really about Devonte here. I prefer Hill over Devonte, but I have no pushback on Devonte, and I think this game's pretty good. So I'm not opposed to going there either, especially my non-Henry lineups where if I can get Tyreek and Devonte, which I can in my non-Henry lineups, it's not bad.
Can you rank then Devonte, Kupp, and Hill?
Hill, Devonte, Uber, Kupp. I think
I might have Kupp over Devonte.
So
just from a sheer touchdown equity standpoint.
Yeah, that's probably fair.
But you can't go wrong. So again, if you don't want to roster Derrick Henry, you have other options to go to at receiver. So that's very helpful. But the problem for me with the Packers is it's Devonte and really nobody else, and Devontae's salary is always super high. That being said, I do kind of like Washington as an offense. I don't know what the trade rumors might be doing.
They were inaccurate according to reports.
Yeah, but I mean,
shocker that there were incorrect reports out about Deshaun Watson.
So this is just an offense I've been cool with for the most part. I would like if Antonio Gibson just rested up, because I would play JD McKissick at 5,700. I don't think I'd get the Jarrett Patterson just because I don't know what the role will be.
No,
we've seen McKissick get enough work where even in neutral scripts where you'd have to think he's the lead guy, even if he doesn't handle a full on workload because he's just a smaller back. The salary is really good and the game's good enough for that. And then we have Terry McLaurin, 72, if he's good to go. Ricky Seals-Jones. So, I mean, the way that I can just stack this is so narrow.
Yeah.
That doesn't get me excited.
So you say you don't like doing comps. I do. So I want to give you a comp.
I'm bad at comps.
Okay.
It's cool if you do them. I just don't.
Okay.
They're not my forte.
Buy or sell this comp. If Antonio Gibson sits, JD McKissick is DeAndre Swift effectively. Do you buy or sell that comp?
I would say a DeAndre Swift minus by about 10%.
That's fine because his salary is 89% lower.
Yeah.
So yeah. Last year, I actually don't know if this is the stretch that Antonio Gibson missed. I'm just pulling games where he happened to have a big snap rate. But in 3 games where Gibson is out, McKissick averaged 9.7 carries and 8 targets per game. That is 26 adjusted opportunities per game with 86 yards per game. That's almost a DeAndre Swift clone. DeAndre Swift this year is at 25 adjusted opportunities and 86 yards per game. So literally the exact same thing. So I would say if there's no Antonio Gibson, just treat JD McKissick as if he is DeAndre Swift. If you look at early downs last week when Gibson left early, McKissick played 24 snaps in early downs for Washington. Gibson played 20 and Jarrett Patterson played 2. So I'm not expecting an 80% snap rate where McKissick gets all the early down work, but I would expect him to get me 9 to 10 carries plus 8 targets. And that's very much enough to be viable, even on a half PPR site, because reception volume is so valuable, even on FanDuel. So I think McKissic, I was lower on him earlier in the week. The more I thought about it, the more I've realized, okay, he's just DeAndre Swift. Like, that's what he is if there's no Antonio Gibson.
Yeah, I mean, you made a case. I wouldn't have gone that heavy, but I mean, it makes sense. That's why I'm not good at comps.
He scored 15 points last week with no touchdowns. That's awesome. I love that for a running back. See the red zone work he's gotten this year. While I'm pulling that up, can you rank Devonte, Booker, Miles Sanders, and JD McKissic for me?
Assuming no Gibson.
Correct.
And at salary, or they're probably all about the same. So
yeah, they're about the same.
Yeah. If no Gibson, it might be McKissic first.
Yep.
Booker, Sanders. That's close.
Yeah, I think that McKissic's first for me. If there's no Gibson, I think that's the part I feel most confident in.
I like the game the most.
Yeah. And then probably Sanders, Booker. But like, it's very close. I could go. Were you definitive with going Booker over Sanders, or was it pretty tight for you?
It was tight. That's why it took me about 15 seconds of dead air to figure it out. The reason I went there is, and I like Miles Sanders plenty.
Mm-hmm.
I just would trust the higher snap rate for Booker.
Yeah.
Sanders seems like they want to get him going a little bit, but you never know. If I would rather take what I've seen than the assumption of certain things, because I feel like one of the easiest mistakes, one of the easiest traps to fall into with DFS is assuming and projecting what you see is what the coaches see and actually want to do. So I never try to do that, which is often why my takes are pretty reserved.
It should be. I mean, like, it's a volatile sport. This is kind of off topic, but like with the Sanders versus Booker thing, in the two games with no Saquon, Booker's averaged 64 yards per game, whereas Sanders this year is at 65. I think that's kind of the key thing for me in Sanders' favor, is he's been there already and he could get a potential role expansion in terms of usage this week.
But it's tough because like Miles Sanders is really good.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And I think a lot of people will be like, well, they're trying to get him the ball more. He's going to play more, and he's really good. And it's like, sure. And I'm about to talk about this team. I think Arrow's up on this offense, so maybe we should just pop over there and see if
before we
bump up.
You was a beautiful transition. I'm proud of you, but
it took me 6 years to learn how to do transitions.
I'm sorry, you did a good job. I'm proud of you. A little pat on the head. Terry McLaurin would be a really good pivot if Gibson can't go, because people will go to McKissic. But McLaurin, like, we've seen Green Bay get shredded on deep balls since Jair Alexander got hurt. So I think, like, if I'm doing one lineup, I prefer McKissic straight up. But like, if you're trying to get leverage, I think that McLaurin would be a really good pivot. I also do still like Ricky Seals-Jones, assuming he's healthy. $40 too.
It's funny because I assumed McLaurin was just more of a pivot and kind of a priority as it is. So
okay, yeah, that's fair. Okay, so now let's talk about Miles Sanders and transition into the trend section, because the Eagles, it was fine. The Eagles are getting Lane Johnson back this week. He missed the past couple of games due to a personal matter, attending to his mental health. Now he is back. Dallas Goedert might be back. We don't know yet. Not sure yet. But you're going to talk about the impact of Lane Johnson, who, breaking news, is very good at football. So I'm happy to see him back for lots of reasons.
Yeah, and without Zach Ertz now. Which is noteworthy. But yeah, with Johnson coming back, I wanted to dig into this team. And according to NFL's Next Gen Stats, Jalen Hurts has, since last season, accrued 381 dropbacks in total, 279 without Johnson, 102 with him. The samples are kind of small, but they're not super tiny either. With Johnson on the field, Hurts has been pressured on 24% of his dropbacks, but 36% when Johnson's been out. So a 12-point gap there. The sack rate, 4.9% with Johnson, 7.2% without him. So over 2 there. Expected points added per drop back, just a 0.02 with Johnson, which is not flawless, but a negative 0.1 without him, which very clear gap there. Success rate 46% with, 38% without. Yards per attempt 8.0 with and 6.8 without. So lots of good numbers there. Doesn't make Jalen Hurts the league's best passer, but makes Jalen Hurts go from below average to above average. And I will take that with all of it, everything else that comes with this offense and with his rushing. So for me, I think that people are very quick to judge Jalen Hurts as a passer, and I get it, but this should be a much better situation for him this week. And I want to take advantage if people are assuming he's still really bad at passing the football, which again could happen here. But the splits say you want Lane Johnson out there. Seems like a pretty safe take. They just traded away Zach Ertz, and Ertz actually has better splits when Ertz is off the field, which I just find funny. I've defended Zach Ertz on this podcast from because they were giving him the ball enough, but efficiency wise, maybe it's a good thing. And with Ertz out, they should just free up targets for the other guys. It takes one, proverbial mouth to feed off the field. We don't know if Dallas Goedert's going to play yet, but Ertz had a 16% target share this season, which was second best on the team. 21% of the red zone target share. Both of those target shares are second best on the team. And in 5 games with Dallas Goedert, again, not clear to play just yet, but Devonte Smith leads the team with 23% of the targets, just a 7% red zone target share. So that's kind of the big drawback for Smith. And I like Devonte Smith this week at a salary of $5,800, but no red zone work, and the Raiders are good against receivers and at limiting the downfield pass. But factoring in the expected efficiency bump here, I still like Smith plenty at the salary. Then it's Jalen Reagor at 15% in those games with Goedert, but no red zone work. Kenny Gainwell's at 12%, followed up by Goedert and Miles Sanders at 11%. So for me, I think Jalen Hurts is a great play, which is not the boldest take, but I think what I'm saying is I think he's a better play than most people will realize with Johnson back. I also think that Devonte Smith, despite a tougher individual matchup, is the clear number one as far as pass catchers go. And if we were to put extra stock into week 6 without Dallas Goedert, it'd actually be Quez Watkins. But point being, this game is pretty intriguing overall. And this could be one of those games where if I didn't dig in deeper, I'd say, well, Jalen Hurts just really isn't doing it, so I don't want to fall into that trap. But there's a lot to like here. So we talked about Sanders, talking about Smith now, Hurts. What are your thoughts on the Eagles with Johnson back and this game overall?
So if you were ranking out quarterbacks this week, Mahomes won, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
I would probably put Tannehill 2 due to the salary. That could be stupid, but I think I'd probably put him 2. And then I think it's either Lamar Jackson or Jalen Hurts 3. Would you agree with that rough ranking?
Yeah.
Okay.
Doing our loves, I was almost there, although I don't want to overlook Kyler Murray either. It's really hard. But point being, Hurts is in the conversation for possibly second if you're low on Tannehill.
I think that it's Mahomes in a tier of his own, and then those other guys are in that second tier. I'd agree with that. As far as Smith, he gets 2 things in his favor. It's the increased target share with no Ertz potentially, but also increased efficiency, which has kind of been the big bugaboo this year, is that they just haven't been efficient. So I feel like those are 2 big bumps in a game that should feature a lot of plays. He's $5,800, a range that I will beat pretty often this week at wide receiver. So I feel like he's a really good play again. I don't think I'll get to Quez Watkins. I think that there are signs that his role will increase, but will his role increase enough to be viable for DFS in a bad passing offense? Probably not there yet, but I'll keep an eye on it. So to me, I think it's about Devonte Smith and Miles Sanders. If Goddard gets cleared Thursday, I don't know if he's had any negative tests yet, but if he gets cleared Thursday, maybe I'll get there. But I like Higby more. I like Gesicki more in that same range. Pitts about even.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I probably won't get to Goddard unless he gets cleared pretty early in the week. So to me, it's Miles Sanders, Devonte Smith. It's probably just those 2 guys, but I feel pretty good about those 2 guys. And I do feel good about Hurts as well.
Yeah, so I mean, the reason that I think this is extra appealing is that this total is 49.5 and the spread's 3. So it's kind of one of the I mean, if you were looking just process wise, this game should be considered second in terms of the games with the high spreads or high totals, but close spreads. So where are you with the Raiders?
I like Waller a lot.
Because we were talking about Tannehill. The only other name that really jumped out to me that if I needed to save salary and had to get away from Tannehill would be Derek Carr. I don't think I could get there because there are a ton of high upside quarterbacks on the slate. But the sheer fact that I would even consider him probably tells me enough. So talk to me about the Raiders.
I just don't like using quarterbacks who are not named Patrick Mahomes against defenses that play the style the Eagles do, where they just want to limit big plays. That's really annoying. And that also hurts Henry Ruggs, who I think it has enough of a role to like be considered because he's like so explosive. So lower on Ruggs, lower on Carr due to the kind of defense the Eagles play, but Waller sets up really well. 24% of the overall targets so far this year. He has 25% of the deep targets. That doesn't matter as much this week given the way they play, but 35% in the red zone. So this is not a Darren Waller against the Jets situation last year where I think you go for 40, but like I would say the odds that he's the highest scoring tight end in the slate are pretty high relative to where they usually are. So I would say favorite Raider is Waller. I'm not entirely. Should I say it? Should I say it?
Say it.
Not entirely opposed to Josh Jacobs.
Yep.
Oh, it's so painful. It's so painful. He's not playing well. That matters. But he's getting some targets. He's had 5-5-1 targets since he came back. Let's see here. Since he came back, he has 48% of the team's red zone opportunities. That is actually second on the slate behind Derrick Henry, just above Aaron Jones. He's getting 22 adjusted opportunities per game. Like their rushing offense is really bad, but the Eagles rushing defense is really bad too. So like I want a lot more Fournette. I want more Darrell Williams, but I'm going to have a non-zero amount of Josh Jacobs. It's very similar to Miles Sanders where I already regret it, but like whatever, I kind of feel like it's the right thing to do here.
This honestly feels like I'm not comping these guys because they're very different and the way that they can get high ceilings is very different, but I was low on Jonathan Taylor last week. But that was a game that I should have been higher on. And I just talked about how this game has a high total and a close spread, but it's not necessarily one that I'm targeting because I like the offenses in the games with the larger spreads and obviously Kansas City, Tennessee. It just feels like one of those games that, this is a 4:05 game, so it's not quite, I can't say it like at 3 o'clock, but at like 6 o'clock, this game's trending toward the over and we kind of know mostly where the ball's going. It's like, should have been higher on this game. That should have put me on Josh Jacobs. So I have a little bit of FOMO with Jacobs, which is weird because he's not really a FOMO player.
He's not a Bernie kind of guy. Yeah.
Yeah. But like this game kind of has that like, everything just pointed toward playing this game.
Yeah.
Especially if people are lower on it, which with KC, Tennessee being so popular, this game's probably going to be a little bit overlooked anyway. So this is one of the games that I kind of have been honing in on a little bit more as I stare at this slate for the 40th hour this week.
I have more FOMO than FOMO with Jacobs, where I fear of being on, but like I think I'm gonna do it either way. It's FOMO with Miles Sanders too, but like I think both those guys are in consideration this week at running back. Let's move now and talk about the heavily favored teams this week. We know a bunch of teams are heavily favored here. That means we have to decide how to handle them, and in general, players on those teams are fine. Looking at a cash game, sick. They're awesome. Because if you're going to blow a team out, you got to score points. So don't cross those guys off your list in cash games. And I think for small field tournaments too, they're totally fine. But for large field tournaments, I think there is leeway to be underweight on them relative to the field. That's backed up by the data. We can see this by comparing what the public does versus what works out well. So I compared popular players in the FanDuel Sunday Million last year versus players who wound up being in perfect FanDuel lineups. For quarterbacks, tight ends, and defenses, it was the three most popular options at each position each week in the FanDuel Sunday Million. At running back and wide receiver, it was the top 7 in roster rate. So popular players based on those parameters. I looked at how often players on teams that were double-digit favorites fell in each bucket, whether they're popular or in the perfect lineup. Overall last year, 6.1% of all teams were double-digit favorites. That's the baseline, 6.1%. At quarterback, 11.8% of all perfect quarterbacks were double-digit favorites, which is almost double the baseline. That's very good. but it's also well short of the 19.6% of all popular quarterbacks who were heavy favorites. So those quarterbacks were good. They outperformed baseline, but the public overinvested in that position. Same is true at defense. There, 31.4% of all popular options were heavily favored versus 17.6% in perfect lineups. Running backs and receivers were actually in perfect lineups right around the baseline of 6.1%. Running back actually fell short of the baseline. Only 4.8% of all running backs in perfect lineups were heavily favored. It was 6.8% at wide receiver. Despite that, 13.4% of all popular running backs and 10.9% of all popular wide receivers came from that group. That's a pretty big gap. You know, it was more than double at running back, a little bit more at wide receiver. And I do think it means that players in those scripts are at those positions, running back and receiver specifically, tend to be overvalued by the public. It mattered the least to tight end. So here's up on Tyler Higby again. What could go wrong? There, 11.8% of perfect tight ends were heavily favored compared to 13.7% of all popular tight ends. So if you're going to care less about a spread, tight end is very much the best spot to do so. That's good for Higby. Would be good for Gronk if you're to play. Doesn't seem like he will, but I think that is a positive there. So these players are fine. At every position except for running back, they were in the perfect lineup at a higher rate than their baseline. That is good for cash games. And like I said, good for small field tournaments. But for large field tournaments, I am okay being underweight on a lot of these guys as a result of the fact that they're probably not going to get a lot of usage in the fourth quarter. There are exceptions here. Leonard Fournette is among my favorite running backs in the slate. Darrell Henderson, very good play. But I think overall, this is the right move to be underweight on them in large field tournaments. So Brandon, how do you view this? Are you different from me in terms of how you view heavily favored teams? And how does that pertain to this specific slate where 40% of the favored teams are heavy favorites?
Yeah, that's the thing for me is I'm crossing off, not crossing off because it's not what you said to do. But
Right.
if I were to, let's just say, cross off the heavy favorites, I'd be crossing off the Cardinals, Rams, Bucks. You could throw in the Packers there. I'm not going to throw in the Patriots.
I mean, you can cross them off for different reasons.
Yeah. That's a lot of key players there, and that's problematic, especially the one that stands out to me most, I think, within the whole context of who's a heavy favorite and the position that he plays, Darrell Henderson.
Yeah.
I would love him this week if the spread wasn't 15.5.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's like, I'm going to play some Henderson. The data says to be underweight on him. So I'm going to trust that because I'm not smarter than the data.
Yeah.
So, overall, boy, this is tough because it just takes so many of the good teams, again, not off the board, but makes you really second guess it. And so for Kyler specifically, jumping over to that quarterback, I mean,
so this is anecdotal. This is not,
yeah.
I've not researched this, but I worry less about the big spread when it's a quarterback who will run because that gives them more chances to have a rushing touchdown. And that's kind of part of the appeal with Kyle. He hasn't run as much this year. I think that I worry about it less for him than I worry about it for Stafford. I think if we're going to compare those two, I worry about it less for Kyler than Stafford.
Yeah. Although Stafford's got his own thing going on. So, yeah. And so where do you think you'll be with Kyler in terms of ranking the quarterbacks?
So Mahomes, Tannehill, Hurts, Lamar. I'm probably not going to play more than 5 quarterbacks. And that was 4 or 5 that I just listed. So I might not get there. Like, I think that he's a fine play, but I might not get there just because I want to keep my core so tight.
Yeah, that's scary.
I don't feel good about it, but
yeah, I will say that since 2012, quarterbacks favored by double digits have at least, and especially against bottom 6 pass defenses, which should apply to Kyler, they've overperformed in the odds that they get to 300 and 3 touchdowns. So Kyler's very much in play. Boy,
Lamar or Kyler for you? Because Lamar's in a very low play volume game, which we'll talk about in a second.
Kyler.
Okay. I'd probably go Lamar, but I think it's close.
Okay.
I think it's close. That's what I'd say. Like, I think that Kyler's in that second tier, but he's probably below the other guys just because I like those games more. So we'll see. I will knock it to Stafford. That could be a mistake, but because he doesn't run, I do worry a bit about the script there. I think Henderson's totally fine. The issue that I have with Henderson is not him. It's the fact that I can get Fournette, who is a usage clone of Henderson, for $1,000 less. So I think that's the reason that I'll be like, I'll have Henderson, but I think he'll be, so I mentioned Jones will be like 10 to 15%. I think Henderson's probably around 20 to 25 for me or so, somewhere around there.
Yeah, I'll definitely play Stafford though.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to do a bet on Stafford versus someone? Actually, no, the bet doesn't make sense because he's great for, like, his median expectation would be very good. So that's a dumb bet. Don't listen to me. Let's go to your second trend now and talk about the Carolina Panthers with no Christian McCaffrey, because they are a very different offense when Christian McCaffrey is not out there. So you're going to talk about what they've looked like here, what we should do with them as they face the Giants here this week.
Yeah, so I mentioned this already. The only games that we had not planned on touching on by the time I got to the sheet for my second trend was the Jets Patriots and the Giants Panthers, and so it's an easy call from there. So I wanted to dig into something about this Giants Panthers game, and I know we looked last week at the Panthers offense with McCaffrey, but I think it's time to look at them without McCaffrey. Now that we got an extra week of data on Sam Darnold with the Panthers without Christian McCaffrey, they're favored in this game by 3 points, so their implied team total sits at 23, which is 11th on the slate of 20 teams, which isn't enough to get you to want to go there, especially with how Sam Darnold has played. But there are pieces in this offense that I don't think we just write off. That makes them relevant, at least way more relevant than the Patriots for context, despite the a higher implied team total by about 1.75 points for the Patriots. Specifically, that would be Chuba Hubbard and DJ Moore. We have a bigger sample of Sam Darnold splits again without McCaffrey because we got last week, and they're not great. He's averaging 6.5 yards per attempt without McCaffrey and 8.3 yards per attempt with McCaffrey, as well as a massive shift in next-gen stats' EPA per dropback, 0.30 with McCaffrey on the field, minus 0.27 without McCaffrey. That's pretty substantial. And if we left it at that, I think we would say no Sam Darnold, no Panthers, too big of an issue. But the Giants are 25th in numberFire's adjusted pass defense metrics, and Darnold over the past 3 games without McCaffrey has faced defenses that ranked 2nd, 11th, and 14th against the pass by numberFire's metrics. In the first 3 weeks with McCaffrey, and at least temporarily in week 3, they faced defenses that ranked 13th, 22nd, and 28th. So I'm not saying McCaffrey is not a factor here. He is, but I think pass defenses also factor in. And for as much as we want to dislike Sam Darnold, we've seen him do some stuff against weaker pass defenses. In total, Sam Darnold has played barely below expectation once you account for opponent adjustments, so it's not as bad as perception seems. It's a great matchup this week. The NFL average in numberFire's passing net expected points per dropback metric is a 0.13 this season. The Giants have let up 0.30 per dropback. And among all starters they've faced, they've held just one quarterback below average, and that was Matt Ryan at a 0.08 when he had a 4.18 dot. He still got to 243 yards and 2 touchdowns. So I think Darnold is not someone I'm going to play specifically, but I think there's enough here where we don't write off this offense, specifically with DJ Moore and Chuba Hubbard. DJ Moore's at a 29% target share in 3 games without McCaffrey. Robbie Anderson's kind of dusty with the 26% target share in those games. But each of those guys are averaging at least 2.3 downfield targets per game and a red zone target per game. DJ Moore is at a 39% red zone share. And as for Hubbard, he's played almost 60% of the snaps in those 3 games without McCaffrey, with a solid 25 adjusted opportunities per game. 22 last week, but lost our red zone rush to Tommy Tremble, which you hate to see. And the Giants
got Tommy Tremble in Dynasty.
Did you start him?
No. Well, it's a best ball team.
So okay, there you go.
I don't think he started despite the touchdown anyway, but it's fine.
And the Giants are a below average rush defense, so it's not the most glorious game, but it's a game that I think has more appeal than you would look at and see initially. So are you still way down on this offense, or did I maybe convince you that better days are ahead for Darnold?
I still think they suck. So I think that like you can use more and you can use Hubbard because of the usage. I don't think I will use Hubbard. I think you can. I don't think I will, just because the salary is too high at 73. Like I honestly might go Mixon over him, despite the fact Mixon's in a really tough matchup. Like they just signed Amir Abdullah this week. I wouldn't be shocked if Abdullah and Royce Freeman take away some passing game usage from him. Or I actually don't know if they signed him. They had him in for a workout, but I think they're looking for a passing game back, which could eat into his outlook a bit. So I probably won't get to Hubbard, but I think he can kind of make sense. I think Robbie is back at his old stomping grounds if you want to go for that, but I don't really care. He's just, I don't think he's good anymore. Like, I don't know. Is that weird to like, he had 11 yards and 11 targets last week. Like, what is
Not
that?
great. Not great.
What is that?
So it sounds like I'm higher on DJ more than you then.
I think he's fine. It's hard for me to use him over. Like, let's see here. I'd much rather have Jamar Chase than DJ Moore. I'd rather have Calvin Ridley, 73. Marquise Brown at 73. McLaurin at 72. I think the workload is very good. I just don't think there's enough juice in said workload with this quarterback and with this offense playing the way it is for me to get there.
I feel like I'm going to get some slight vindication with Darnold this week.
What define vindication? Like he doesn't turn the ball over 16 times? Like what's the baseline for goodness here?
That he supports fantasy viable games for Chuba Hubbard and DJ Moore.
Fantasy viable, sure, but high upside games, that's the where I get hung up. Do you want to do Tua versus Darnold fantasy points bet?
It's not about Darnold specifically. It's about, can we go to Chuba Hubbard because we need running backs that like stand
okay, let's
out.
find a way to make this Tua versus
like
Darnold
but here's you're saying you like Calvin Ridley more and you like Terry McLaurin more, and we're just to the point where like Sam Darnold in a good matchup is significantly worse than Taylor Heineke and a dusty Matt Ryan.
Correct.
That like
verbatim how I'd phrase it.
What I'm saying is I don't think that we need to be that low on Darnold anymore from an efficiency split standpoint. That's my overall case.
Agree to disagree. Can we do something around Darnold and Tua? I don't know how you want to phrase it.
It's a bet. It's like, that's all we can do.
Like straight up fantasy points or what?
Can you name me an alternative that makes any sense?
Over what?
You're saying, is there anything we can do between two?
We can do passing at expected points.
I'm not doing that kind of stuff.
Okay. Well, I'll just do it. Whatever. This is for fun.
You can do it, but like Darnold at 7,700 is not a play I'm looking to make.
Right, but like that's a good way to measure like overall fantasy or overall like production, I guess, is just like through fantasy points. I don't know. Would you want to do like a team total bet of Panthers versus Dolphins? Maybe? Like who scores more points?
Sure.
Okay. Cool. So I have Dolphins, you've got Panthers. What could go wrong? Let's move to my second trend now and talk about that Ravens-Bengals game, specifically because the usages here are good. The pace is terrible. It's a terrible game. You've got it as the slowest game on the main slate, and that does matter a lot. One way to overcome that, though, is via concentrated usage, and both teams in this game give us that. We got 4 games here with all the Bengals pass catchers healthy. In those games, T. Higgins does have 24% of the targets, while Jamar Chase is at 23%, but Chase has 72% of the deep targets in those 4 games. It's absurd. He's $7,500. I am very okay with that salary for him. Joe Mixon, 26 adjusted opportunities per game in his full games this year. Samaje Perine is back. He just got active from the COVID list today. But that number ranks 4th in the slate in each back's most relevant sample, and most of those came with Samaje Perine active. Mixon ranks 4th in yards per game, and he was up to 3rd if Damian Williams returns to the Bears. That would make Herbert's sample different for the Bears. $7,200 for Mixon. I think that's fine. Baltimore has been awesome against the rush, so Mixon's not at the top of my list, but I'm willing to use him due to the usage that he gets. For the Ravens, only 3 guys had more than 3 targets last week. Those were Rashad Bateman, Mark Andrews, and Marquise Brown. Bateman and Andrews had 6 targets while Brown had 5, but that was in a massively positive game script where they were able to run the football. The Bengals rank 3rd in schedule adjusted rush defense, but are 17th against the pass. I think we'll see more passing here. It should be good. Brown is $7,300. I would expect people to stay away this week. I would not. Bateman's a great salary saver at $6,300 or $5,300. Might be one of the better value receivers in this slate. I'm fine with Andrews at 75. I might not get there because this game isn't as intriguing as some others where I can scoop some tight ends. So to me, we've got 3 very usable wide receivers here with Jamar Chase, Marquise Brown, and Rashad Bateman. And I'm okay with Joe Mixon too. Lamar, I would say, is top 4 for me at quarterback as well. So how are you viewing this game from a stacking perspective between the Ravens and the Bengals?
I want to be higher on it, but I also want to be okay being lower on it because I would fully anticipate the play volume is low and you need plays or hyper efficiency to put up a lot of FanDuel points. The concern is that I always love Lamar. I like Marquise Brown at this point. I love Rashad Bateman at the salary. I like Mark Andrews with his workload, although it's a high number at 7,500 with that salary in a game where you might think that there's not a ton of plays. So it's almost like I got to talk myself into this game playing faster than everything tells me it will. And I don't really like doing that. So I see the appeal and I like simultaneously want to like this game, but I also want to not fall into that trap.
Yeah. So, like, does that mean you're totally off these guys or just not prioritizing them?
Just not prioritizing them. Because this would be the type of...
Bateman?
Bateman's probably the lone exception just because the salary is so low.
Yeah.
But this is one of those games where I would probably say, normally I would be like, no, there are a lot of key plays in this game and the pace won't be so bad or the pace won't matter so much because they'll just be really efficient. And then this could just be one of those games where it's like 7-0 halfway through the second quarter.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why it's not a priority for me. But like, I think all these guys are very much in play just because the usage is so concentrated.
Yes, but we have to balance this and the stackability of this game compared to the teams and the games with higher spreads. So like, this is a key discussion.
Give me a comparison here. Like, who are we comparing against?
So same total, Buccaneers and Ravens. Like same over under there at 47.
So like the wide receivers, like Godwin versus Marquise.
So like which team are you more likely to stack? The Bucs or the Ravens?
I don't think I want to stack either because I don't want, like, I guess I could go Godwin, Mooney, but like I just don't have any faith in the Bears.
So it's not even a strict like bring back unless you're saying that you would never build a lineup with no bring backs.
No,
would you rather play the Buccaneers and like Fournette and the receivers or the Ravens?
If I had to rank them out between those 2 teams, Fournette is 1.
Yeah.
Like easily 1.
Yeah.
Then number 2,
like I think it'd be Godwin over Marquise Brown or like, and the Bateman's a different conversation because he's just a value receiver. But like,
yeah,
I'm gonna play Chris Godwin over Marquise Brown, right?
I think it's close. But I think that also is an endorsement to Godwin because Godwin is $600 lower. So saying that it's close means that I'll probably be on Godwin. But I feel like for me, if I'm ranking out those 2, it's Fournette 1, Bateman 2 because of the salary, obviously. And then it's either Goodwin or Godwin. Or sorry, Goodwin. Marquise Goodwin. Wow, Marquise Brown. Very different. Although it is Marquise Goodwin against the Bucs, I think. I don't know if he's still there, but I don't keep track on Marquise Goodwin's roster status all that close.
So maybe. Yeah. So I said like we should compare these games to games with higher higher spreads. I keep messing that up for whatever reason. A very similar game, like same total, another tight spread is Falcons Dolphins. How does this game, the Ravens Bengals, compare to Falcons Dolphins for you?
Well, the part of the appeal of the Falcons Dolphins game is that the salaries are pretty low.
Yes,
but I would say that those guys are more undersalaried. But you're not saying that you're not going to use any Marquise Brown and and Jamar Chase, right?
I'm not saying that. I'm
Okay, then
saying
we're on the same page. We're on the same page. I don't think their priorities is why they're brought up last, but like I think that they're worthwhile despite the pace because the usage is so concentrated.
yes, but we were talking then about like the game overall, and it's the type of game where I feel like maybe I should like it more, but
No, that's
simultaneously like
fine.
it
Yeah,
less
I
because I
agree.
know the play volume's low.
I agree. Like that's that. Yeah, I agree. Like
Okay.
we're saying the same thing. Like that's the first thing I said
Kinda.
is the pace is
Kinda.
bad. That's the first thing I said is
No,
the pace is bad.
yes, but we have to contextualize that because we can say the pace is bad and we don't care and we want to
I
load
didn't say
up
that.
on these guys. I'm not saying you did. I'm saying we need to like clarify.
Okay, yeah, okay. To clarify, they're not priorities over other options on the slate, but I think that they're still in play despite the bad pace because the usage is so concentrated.
And within this game, really narrow with
Yes.
Brown, Chase, and Bateman mostly.
Yes, agreed.
So, okay.
Yep, I'm on board. But the pace probably lowers you on Lamar, correct?
Yes,
Would that be a difference maker where you go Hurts over Lamar?
I believe so.
I think I am there as well. Weather for this slate doesn't look too bad. Nothing like last week. A couple games with some weather or some wind. Just check back on Sunday morning. 14-mile-per-hour winds for Dolphins, Falcons. 11 for Washington, Green Bay, and 11 for Bucks, Bears. Right now, I don't care too much about any of those, but check back on those on Sunday morning. Let's go now to our position by position breakdown for the Week 7 main slate. Brandon, at quarterback, who stands out to you?
Before I even say that, the Eagles activated Dallas Goedert from the COVID-19 list.
That'll work. Welcome back, Dallas.
So quarterback, a lot of overlap this week for us. Patrick Mahomes, he's the number one play. He's been great despite facing one team outside the top 20 in pass defense based on numberFire's adjusted metrics. In that game, which was last week, he threw for 397 yards and 2 touchdowns. Titans are 23rd against the pass, 31st against the deep ball. And then my second love is just Ryan Tannehill. I think he's the best value play of the week. Again, I already talked about this, but if you look at the full sample, there's not a whole lot to get you excited. If you account for the injuries, not a whole lot to get you excited. But if you adjust for the fact that this is not a good pass defense, Tannehill's been fine in those games, especially with AJ Brown. Again, doubling up the league average efficiency in that short sample. So I'm cool with that. And just because we have so much overlap, I also would love Jalen Hurts and Matthew Stafford to the point where I almost consider just talking about them. But
yeah,
Mahomes, Tannehill are my number one and number two.
Mahomes is my one too, for the same reason you mentioned. I love him. If I've got one lineup, Mahomes will be in it. If I had to go to the second one, I did have Tannehill here, but because we talked about him, let's go to Jalen Hurts just really quickly. I think there's a lot of like consternation around Hurts because he keeps paying off in garbage time. But like, and the garbage time is not always guaranteed. But part of the path to garbage time not happening is if he plays well earlier on. And the odds he plays well with Lane Johnson back are higher. So to me, I don't really care too much that most of his production has come in garbage time recently, because the odds that he pays off before then are decently high because he's been good. Like he was not really in garbage time against Kansas City. Like that game was somewhat competitive throughout. He had 28 FanDuel points there, 23 against Dallas, 22 against San Francisco, 29 against Atlanta. I think that he's just like a good fantasy quarterback, and I'm just going to keep using him because I have no reason not to right now. So to me, it's definitive rankings. Mahomes, Tannehill, Hurts is the way I'm going to rank it for right now.
Yeah, that's my top three as well.
Okay, let's go to running back. What you got there?
So I'm going to go with Derrick Henry. I think you have to strongly consider him. So I think where I'm settling is I want to be overweight on Henry. Assuming it's Thursday, maybe 30% roster rate for him overall, get up to about 40-50%. Don't have to lock him in. It's a little bit too restrictive, but he's the guy on the slate. 33 adjusted opportunities per game, 87% of the team's red zone carries, 71% snap rate, 3 targets per game. The Chiefs are 31st in rushing net expected points per carry allowed to running backs and in rushing success rate allowed to backs as well. My second love is I'm going to jump down to Chuba Hubbard. I know you don't like him this much, but I feel pretty good with this offense in this matchup. Going to take a chance here. Hubbard played 66% of the team snaps last week, 3 targets on 19 routes, 50% of the red zone carries the past 3 weeks. I think that the role is enough to trust. I do prefer Leonard Fournette, but we already had so much overlap that I just didn't want to talk about him in detail. And my third love is going to be Miles Sanders. I think there's a lot to like about this offense as well, with Lane Johnson back, maybe without Zach Ertz as well. Could kind of maybe up Miles Sanders' touchdown expectation. The Raiders are 22nd in adjusted FanDuel points per carry allowed to backs, 25th in adjusted FanDuel points per target allowed to backs. And Sanders is coming off an 81% snap rate game, 3 red zone carries, 4 targets, including a downfield target, which I didn't realize. But I think arrows up on this offense and Miles Sanders, especially at that salary.
I agree. I do like him as well. My top love is also Derrick Henry at $11,000. I know the salary is high, but like the gap between him and everyone else is monstrous. He's 154 yards per game so far, like from scrimmage. He has 49% of the team's red zone opportunities in this season. I can get there and make it not suck, so I would like to. My number 2 love is Leonard Fournette because he's had a pretty clear role change the past couple weeks. In the past 2 games with Giovanni Bernard back, Fournette is still at 28 adjusted opportunities per game. He has 119 yards per game. He's at a 34% red zone share, but it does help that they're getting a ton of red zone chances. The Bears rank 20th against the rush, so I think Fournette's just under salary. And if I had to choose again between him and Henderson, they're very similar from a usage perspective. Henderson gets fewer adjusted opportunities per game and fewer yards per game, pretty even in the red zone. So I'll just go Fournette. I think the Henderson definitely is someone I want to use, but I want to have a lot more Fournette due to the salary and the fact that I think his role is a little bit better than Henderson's right now too. My third love was going to be Devonte Booker, and I still don't mind him, but I'm going to pivot to J.D. McKissic. I think that if we assume Gibson sits, if he doesn't sit, then I don't really need to go here. But if I assume that he sits, again, I think that McKissic is basically just DeAndre Swift. He will get you 9 to 10 carries. He will get you 8 or so targets. And at that salary, that's a lot, especially against a Green Bay defense that we do not fear and a spread that's been tightening, high total. I think that game's pretty good. Again, I don't mind Booker, and I will use him. But if I can get McKissic, he is my favorite lower salary back above Booker and above Sanders. I'd rank them McKissic 1, Sanders 2, Booker 3. That's where I'm settling out for now, is my ranking there. Let's move to wide receiver. What you got there?
Because I mentioned Henry and Mahomes, I can't mention Tyreek Hill, although it's very clearly a smash spot for him. But I'm going to go with A.J. Brown at 7,000. The Chiefs are 29th against the pass, according to numberFire's metrics. And Brown has played 2 top 3 defenses and 2 outside the top 20 in his full games. 109 air yards, just 41 yards, which I know. But 25% of the targets, 39% of the air yards, 14% of the red zone targets in those games against more comparable defenses. They got to involve him or they'll probably lose very quickly. Also considered Chris Godwin here to save some salary. Speaking of saving some salary, my second love is going to be Jaylen Waddle at 5,900. He had a great workload last week. I know Devonte Parker, I know they're getting healthier, but a 20% target share in 5 games prior to last week with a really bad ADOT, which I don't think will stick because it's a quarterback change. 22% target share, 10.2 yard ADOT, 2 downfield, 1 red zone target in week 1 with Tua and Parker playing. So I don't feel that concerned about Waddle, especially after breakout games. It's really hard to kind of script him out just because of other guys getting healthy. And then I'm going to go with Devonte Smith as my third love. Going back to the whelp here. But
that's bad.
That's good. That's good. We just know he's the guy in Philly. They lost Zach Ertz. They got a huge upgrade to the offensive line. The main issue is efficiency, which I think should improve. But the issue outside of that still lingers is that the Raiders have been really good against receivers and against the deep ball. But 5,800 for a guy who is just their number one in an offense that should be at least league average in passing efficiency, I'll take.
Yeah, for sure. I think that both those guys, Waddle and Smith, work out well. Love A.J. Brown at 7,000. I want to go with Calvin Ridley as my top love here at wide receiver. Again, Tyreek Hill's a given. Calvin Ridley has had insane volume when he's been out there this year. He has 27% of the overall targets, 59% deep, and 29% in the red zone. You don't get that usage for $7,300 very often. The Dolphins corners should be back this week, but I don't think that should scare us too much. I think that Calvin Ridley is going to explode very, very soon. My number 2 love is in that same game. Devonte Parker sounds like he is trending towards playing. He had 7 targets for 81 yards in his lone game with Tua Tagovailoa this year. He led the team with a 22% target share before his injury. He had 38% of the deep targets, and he's not a separator, which again, we can, talk about that with Tua, and he does prefer that. But for $5,600, if Parker gets in a full practice Friday, I will bite. If he doesn't play, I'll go back to Waddle and feel fine about that. But I want to be in on Parker when he comes back. My third love is Rashad Bateman, just 29 yards in week 6, but unique circumstance where he's facing the Chargers, who sell out to stop the deep ball. And Lamar also didn't play his best game there, but Bateman in his first game had 6 targets, ran a bunch of routes. And I think the key thing is he was getting targets on third down, which means that Tua trusts him. Tua will turn towards him. Lamar will turn towards him. Lamar trusts him. Sorry, Lamar. Didn't mean that. And Bateman actually had more air yards in that game than Marquise Brown. He's $5,300 in a decent game, so I do like Bateman quite a bit for this week. Let's move to tight end. What you got there?
Just for what it's worth, Tua does have a higher tight window throw percentage than league average since 2016. So
again, narratives. Well, also because he had receivers who can't separate, so you got
sure that could,
but yes, you're right. Yeah.
The reason I brought that back up is I was considering Mike Gesicki, but I'm gonna go with Kyle Pitts at 6,100 in that same game. I think both are very viable. He's 8th in among all tight ends in target market share, 5th in weighted targets per game, which accounts for downfield and red zone targets. I have him 2nd behind Rob Gronkowski in red zone targets per game at the position, and Miami's 18th against tight ends once adjusting for opponents faced, so they're not an outlier by any means that I have to avoid. And then my second love is going to be Ricky Seals-Jones, just for some value. He's run around on 90% of the football team's dropbacks in 2 games without Logan Thomas. That mark would lead the position over that sample and also over the full season. They should have to throw, and Green Bay's 25th in adjusted FanDuel points per target allowed to tight ends.
Yeah, RSJ also one of my loves. He did miss practice Wednesday, but sounds like he should be good to go. Probably maintenance due to the workload you mentioned. He's been out there a lot, so got to rest up. 18% of the team's targets in the 2 games with no Logan Thomas. Like you said, the Packers not elite against tight ends, so this tightening spread also positive for Ricky Seals-Jones. So $5,400, I'll go back to him, assuming he's good to go. I also do want to go back to Tyler Higby. I think that Gesicki works once again at $6,000, but Higby's $5,500 gets you a ton of snaps. He has 5+ targets in 4 out of 6 games this year. He has obvious touchdown upside given the matchup. As we discussed in the trends, tight ends aren't as dependent on a back and forth game as wide receivers and running backs. So Higby, it hasn't worked out yet. It's kind of like the Devonte Smith with you saying going back to the whelp. Here we go. I think that that's applicable for Higby too, but I'm going to keep on doing it until I get a firm reason not to from a usage perspective. Let's finish up here at defense. What you got there?
I'm going to go with the Packers at 4,100. They're still affordable, definitely. Washington may or may not have ever been involved in some trade rumors. I think even the buzz that they maybe have been can't help the locker room. So, it's a little bit reading into things, but Antonio Gibson's not 100%. The team's not 100% overall. So that's a big factor. Pro Football Focus does have Washington with a big offensive line advantage, which I don't love. I do think Green Bay is kind of overrated as a team, but they should still put up points against this bad Washington defense, and that'll force them to throw. And we want sacks and turnovers from our defenses.
And Heineke's a D-gaffer, which helps too. So that will that's positive as well. I like the Giants defense. Sorry, I know you talked about Sam Darnold a lot, but he's kind of turned back into Jameis Darnold without the positives that Jameis provides. The Giants have not done anything on defense, but I would expect Leonard Williams to do well against this offensive line. Got a couple sacks last week again. I'm okay with the Jets defense at times. I know that's a stupid thing to say, but they're $3,300. So I will have a non-zero number of Jets shares. I think the Chiefs work at times against the Titans. They played better last week. Chris Jones should be back this week. Made some defensive personnel changes too. Saw some Chiefs. And then other teams I'm okay with: Miami, Green Bay, Ravens, and Bucks. it's a good week. Differentiated defense is what I would say. But if you need to spend down to get to Henry, I think the Giants and the Jets both work. What could go wrong in trusting those two teams? That is all that we have here for today on the Week 7 preview podcast. But if you want more Brandon, he is back with you on Thursday to do our Thursday football preview. You can talk Case Keenum versus Teddy Bridgewater. Oh boy, should be fun. You are doing that at 4 p.m. on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages. We also have our snake draft, which Brandon won last week. That is tomorrow, Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern. YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter. We also have NHL and NBA DFS podcast back here on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast via Tom Vecchio. We got PGA, we got NASCAR, UFC. We've got it all right here on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. So make sure you are subscribed. And if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review. Brandon, if people have questions for you on Twitter, where can they find you there?
I'm at Godula13, GDULA13.
And I am at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to everyone for tuning in for this week. Good luck to you in Week 7. We'll talk to you once again on Monday to wrap it all up. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire.